Sorry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Mental Health Foundation's webinar, Disaster Mental Health with Children and Families Playing in Peril. I am Eric Green, and I am an associate professor at the University of North Texas at Dallas, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. If you have a chance, please collect maybe a white sheet of paper and some colors or markers, because we'll be doing an activity a little bit later. And I want to make a couple of acknowledgments. First, I want to say thanks to the American Mental Health Foundation. It's been advancing mental health now for 90 years, and they have sponsored this event, so thank you. You can visit their website at americanmentalhealthfoundation.org. And also, we'd like to give thanks to CAI, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the quality of healthcare and social services of vulnerable populations. So we're going to turn the webcam off here so we can begin the actual presentation, but I did want to say hello so you all could see me and say hi. And there. So let's go ahead and begin. First, I have a picture here so you kind of know where I am or where we are. So you have a sense of time and place. We're in downtown Manhattan, and this is a view that I took outside of the window, so it just kind of gives you a perspective of where we are. Very happy to be here. So the webinar description. Today's discussion is about disaster response play therapy, and this is a model that Jennifer Baggerly originated in 2007, and she and I have been adding to it and have worked together through a few disasters ourselves as a team. And so I'm going to be speaking from that paradigm, but also from what I've contributed to it with the play-based pieces. And so the description I have here for us is that psychotherapy is not so much indicated in disaster mental health, but it's more so integrating psych first aid and play. And the ultimate aim for disaster response play therapy is safety and stabilization. This presentation will integrate the principles of the play therapy relationship and play-based interventions. And these interventions are often developmentally sensitive that lower the risk of negative effects related to trauma and increase access and use to what we call protective processes. And if you look at the picture on the right, that's me working with a child after the deadly tornadoes recently in Moore, Oklahoma. We're doing some safety and stabilization exercises there. And today's webinar is really based upon especially the clinical aspects of it, my research and my deployments through the Red Cross and World Vision following Hurricane Katrina and Rita, the deadly tornadoes, as I mentioned earlier, and more, Storm Sandy here in New York in 2012. And also I was at Virginia Tech after the mass school shootings in 2007 when I was still full-time at Johns Hopkins. So that's kind of the perspective of where things are coming in from for this webinar. And here are our learning objectives. After the webinar, participants will be able to identify what disaster mental health play therapy is, provide one technique that facilitates safety and stabilization, provide a technique that facilitates access to protective processes, and list 2 attributes of the play therapy relationship relevant in disaster mental health. So as we're getting now into the webinar, I want to start with this quote by Joseph Campbell. And Campbell says, "The dark night of the soul comes just before revelation. When everything is lost and all seems dark, then comes new life and all that is needed. So to sort of kind of frame what we're going to be doing for the next couple of hours, we're going to be looking at disasters and what they are and what they aren't, and what we as volunteer mental health clinicians do to assist children and their families after these calamitous events, and what we shouldn't do. And so I thought that it would be logical or helpful if we kind of started with what the definition of natural disasters are. And then we're going to go into the research, and then I'm sort of going to go into the actual model, and then I'll get to what we call maybe the sweet spot, where we're talking about play therapy interventions, and then we'll close. I've got some blogs that I'm going to be reading to you that I wrote after a recent, actually during a recent disaster, and so I wanted to share those with you as well. So natural disasters are calamitous events that meet the following 6 criteria. It involves the destruction of property and life. If you just look at those 6 areas on your screen now and read through them. In 2012, a total of 357 natural disasters, including earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, wildfires, and epidemics across the globe, resulted in over 10,000 deaths, 124 million victims, and $157 billion in damage. In the United States of America, Hurricane Sandy back in 2012 caused 159 deaths, destroyed over 650,000 homes. And due to the warming of the global environment, scientists predict that approximately 175 million children will be exposed to natural disasters throughout the world over the next decade, which is about a 38% increase from the 1990s, which is statistically significant. According to the standards developed by the American Psychological Association and also CACREP, the counseling accredited body in the U.S., also the NASW, the National Association of Social Workers, mental health professionals must be prepared to mitigate the devastating effects of natural disasters on both, with children, both nationally and internationally. Now, disasters and mass trauma oftentimes are comorbid or occur concurrently, but sometimes they can be disparate. So a natural disaster would be typically something that is geologically based or based in some type of weather pattern. So it might be an earthquake, a hurricane, a tornado, wildfires, flooding, and mass trauma, while often is synonymous with that, could be unique, and in the context of mass trauma could involve mass shootings. Unfortunately, we've seen a proliferation of mass shootings at elementary schools, high schools, and universities. I was just in Seattle in June at the Sandplay Conference, and there was a shooting at the university there the morning that I got there. So it's unfortunately become more prevalent than any of us, I think, maybe foresaw. And so with that in mind, it's incumbent upon us as mental health professionals not to be doomsday seekers, but to be cognizant of the current realities that disasters and mass trauma bring from a psychological ramification and a psychological perspective. So I want to kind of take us through some recent disasters just to give us some perspective of sort of what we're dealing with when it comes to the reactions of people who endure these events, because we don't often see that part. What we see and what we contend with is the post-impact phase, which is after the trauma has occurred, which is after the event has occurred. The first image I wanted to show you is Hurricane Katrina. This is from 2005, and as many of you probably remember, this ravaged the Gulf Coast. It was a Category 5, but when it hit New Orleans, it was lowered to, they estimate a Category 2, maybe a 3, but they say it was probably about a 2. And even at a Category 2, we still lost 1,833 lives through that event, and pretty much most, I'd say, majority, especially Canal Street, downtown, the Ninth Ward, were just almost completely destroyed by the breaches of the levee. Here's an image, a city under siege. It's just incredible to see water so high that it's covering ramps and overpasses, you see there's a boat. Also, more along the lines of mass trauma, we had the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. And this happened back in 2012. It was a harrowing ordeal. 20-plus children ended up losing their lives or were injured severely from the gunfire. There was also the Fukushima power plant catastrophe in Japan in March of 11. 2011 and 2012 were pretty volatile years as far as natural disasters are concerned. There were lots of different activities going on, a lot of catastrophic devastation. So in Japan, we had the earthquake, the tsunami, and the nuclear catastrophe, which culminated in the radiation leak. And here's an image of a child, and they're detecting their radiation levels to see what their exposure was. And this child looks almost terrified. So. In Joplin, Missouri, we had that huge, massive tornado in 2011, and 139 people lost their lives from that event. We also had in Alberta, Canada, in May 2011, the Slave Lake wildfires, which destroyed significant portions of this area in Alberta. And here's an image of the desolation there. And in Haiti, we had the terrible earthquake. It was a 7.0 on the Richter scale. It shook that small island country, something fierce, and there was significant loss of life, just as there was after the tsunami in India. I want to start this next section. This is sort of a series I'm going to do throughout the next while that we're together. And these are blogs that I wrote. I was part of a mental health disaster team that was deployed by World Vision in May in Moore, Oklahoma, after the deadly tornado struck. Several people lost their lives. 7 children ended up perishing in that event. And we were sent there to do disaster response play therapy in several churches. And I thought it might be helpful for us to look at some of these so that you have a narrative descriptor instead of just content-based, so that maybe you can get a sense and a feel of what it's like for those of you who are interested in becoming disaster volunteers, what at least my perspective was like, which doesn't mean it's generalizable. But so this first blog that I wrote from Oklahoma was called Carry On. Today our disaster mental health team arrived in Moore, Oklahoma. It was a devastated landscape, miles of destruction and obliterated neighborhoods. as far as the eye dared to see. Homes reduced by the tornado to heaps of unrecognizable rubble. It was post-apocalyptic. Our team arrived at the site where the elementary school was destroyed by the massive tornado, and 7 children lost their lives last week. There was a makeshift memorial with crosses planted in the ground and lit candles. While we visited with the other volunteers, 2 children and their father rode their bikes past us. We spoke to the family for a while, and I played with the kids. The young girl was inside the schoolhouse when the tornado struck. Her father said her brother, they appeared about 5 years old, was so worried about his sister when he saw the tornado, and he knew that she was trapped at the school, that he cried out for God to save her. Sharing this harrowing narrative of others' tragedy is one way for me to empathically process or resolve some of the difficult feelings I'm having as we are now here on the ground amidst complete ruin. Is it fair that we have homes to go back to once we leave? That we have an air-conditioned hotel room at night to sleep in when they don't? The child asked me if we could play, so I offered her a tiara and a wand that I had in my trunk, and she proclaimed, "I'm a fairy princess." She then quickly returned to petting the therapeutic dog, while her older brother showed us how he could ride his bicycle in circles without falling off. He was proud of his achievement. I share this not to recklessly exploit their tragedy, but to honor their courage through the most harrowing of life's ordeals. The spirit of these children appears unbreakable. So here's a picture of me with a therapeutic dog. And this is the site, this is the memorial site. This is where the Plantation Elementary School was completely destroyed. I'm going to show you images of what happened here in just a minute. Tomorrow we'll set up a play space at the church, and we will work with the children. We will be providing a psychoeducation to the parents as well as normalizing the aberrant thoughts and feelings following this life-altering trauma. I'll be working with a family who lost 2 of their young children during the storm. I understand that they are having a particularly difficult grieving experience. I heard the song "Carry On" by Fun playing on the iPod of a young adolescent girl as we visited the memorial site, and it stayed in my mind as we began to relationship build in the community. Please keep them in your prayers tonight, and may God's countenance shine upon the souls who perished during this almost incomprehensible tragedy. And these are the lyrics that I heard from this young girl's iPod as we were surveying this school and town that had been decimated by this storm, because we are as shining stars. We are invincible. We are who we are on our darkest day when we're miles away. So we'll find our way home. It's a great song. If any of you are not familiar with it, if you go to YouTube, I suggest listening to it. It's a really great pop song about overcoming odds and adversity. So this next section is I want to show you some pictures of what the situation on the ground looked like and more. And again, this isn't to exploit the tragedy, but as disaster mental health volunteers, which I'm going to get to when we start getting into the roles that we play, it is incumbent upon us, one of the 7 principles, that we follow what's called incident command structures. What we do is we canvass the area and we attempt to align ourselves with key stakeholders in the community or those who are left so that we can relationship build, not to be experts coming in to solve people's problems, but to be there to sensitively support others through these very horrific experiences. So part of what we do as mental health disaster volunteers is when we get to, or when I get to, ground zero, so to speak, we want to go to where the natural disaster occurred and to see the extent as much as possible of the damage so that we have some context other than what we've seen on the news as to what these children and families have endured. So here's the city of Moore. And this is the first thing that we saw. We were you couldn't get in and out of the city. It was interesting because there was so much devastation. They had roadblocks and sheriffs. So we were allowed to come in, even though we weren't residents there, because we had been deployed there, and we had our ID and our paperwork and everything. But apparently there were people who were coming in to do, I guess, sightsee the trauma. So they were, they were trying to secure the area. So this was the first thing that we see when we get there, and we were not expecting what you're about to see. This was a hospital. This is the remnants of the hospital. It looks almost like a bomb exploded, and here we began surveying the neighborhoods. These were all homes. If you see, the trees were just ripped out from their roots. And here's more imagery. This was particularly disturbing. I was with the team, and we saw this sign. It's someone had spray painted their garage. Winter is coming, and the night is dark and full of terrors. From I can't think of the television show right now. Game of Thrones. That's it. Game of Thrones. Here's a house that was completely taken off of its foundation. This wasn't something that had been cleared. This was just amazing, just completely ripped off its foundation. If you look in the back left of this picture, you'll see something behind those trees. There was a beautiful rainbow that had appeared in the sky. And as we were canvassing the neighborhood, and there were people who were just devastated. I remember some of the women began crying. They thought it was, they saw it as a sign, as a covenant, as a promise of some sort. And it certainly was a welcome sign for us as well. This picture is interesting. I wanted to show you all this because tornadoes and their destructive powers are so dichotomous. This tornado destroyed the entire house and the shed behind it, but left the tree pretty much intact, right in the middle of the two. There's Jennifer, Dr. Jennifer Baggerly, and that's us at the memorial wall where the school was destroyed. Typically after natural disasters, people build memorials to commemorate those who tragically lost their lives. This is an image that I want you all to see so you can have a perspective of what these children went through. So this is Plaza Towers Elementary School. What I want you to notice is look to the left and up at the top and mostly to the bottom. Those are all neighborhoods. Those are the surrounding homes that surrounded the school. Now look what happened after the tornado hit. There's nothing left. It completely, you'll see this on the left and the right side. It completely obliterated the entire area. So I wanted to show you all this. Here's where the 7 children who perished at the school, here's where their graves were put up, and there were candles on the top, and it was all fenced off. If you look closely to the right of the picture, that's where the school was. It was completely demolished while the children were in it. The tornado happened very, very suddenly. as we were talking to people, people were sharing with me or with us that it was a mile wide. Can you imagine that? A mile wide. It's like half of Manhattan's tip or something. I mean, that's a huge storm, and it was so ferocious that all of the children who survived, their eardrums were burst because the noise was so loud. They weren't able to hear for a couple of days. It was a terrifying, terrifying tragedy. This is me with one of the children outside the memorial who survived, obviously, and she was riding her bike by herself at night. So we tried to find to make sure she was okay, and then we found out her dad was with her and her brother, who was standing off looking at the memorial. This is a sign. People often make signs. This one says "Love will conquer all." We do have a question. The question is from, let's see if I can see, this one. What are the statistics that show shootings in schools and how they're occurring more frequently now? I don't have those on hand specifically to school shooting statistics. Most of the statistics I have are related to more natural disasters as opposed to mass trauma. This is from Pete Goddard. Thanks, Pete, for the question. However, I can certainly look that up for you and shoot you an email after the webinar, maybe on Monday, and send you that information. Thanks for the question. Okay. By the way, if anyone else has questions or comments, there's a couple hundred of you online right now. We're very happy we've got such a big group. But that doesn't mean your voice isn't important, so feel free to type out a question or to make a comment. You're welcome to do that, and I certainly engage. I'm so used to speaking with people live and in person. It's a little daunting speaking to a screen, but at the same time, we appreciate you being here. And let's get into the neurophysiological impact of what natural disasters incur. Trauma from natural disasters affect children's neurophysiological systems in ways that cause changes in their behavior, in their cognitive functioning, in their mental health, and in their physical development. Natural disasters and their aftermath may create psychological threats that overwhelm children's typical coping skills. These threats often activate the sympathetic adrenal system, which mobilizes the fight or flight response. This mechanism, if threatened by trauma, can become stuck in a continuous looping, causing hyperarousal, irritability, sleeplessness, intracranial and cerebral volumes, limited explicit memory, and a diminished sense of identity. Memories from a natural disaster often become stored in the brain's right limbic system, and I have a picture of it right here. There it is. In the brain's right, and produce flashbacks, that is, intrusive images, thoughts, smells, and sounds of the terrifying event. To control hyperarousal and flashbacks, children may avoid trauma reminders, such as places, people, or things associated with the event. In the disaster I've been talking about so far today, in Missouri at least, that would probably be school, classrooms, teachers, wind, rain, stormy weather, things like that. So natural disasters that disrupt relationships between infants and their primary caregivers can hinder children's brain development in the prefrontal cortex. So I'm going to go back to this so you can see. There's the prefrontal cortex, which is also called the orbitofrontal cortex, and the anterior cingulate cortex, and the limbic system. Some of these neural circuits are important in psychological, emotional, and physiological development. When these neural structures and pathways are compromised, the future development of empathy and moral judgment can be adversely affected. The good news here related to neuroplasticity is that post-traumatic growth can and oftentimes does occur following a disaster. Oftentimes, if the right conditions are in place, and we're going to be talking about those conditions in great detail here in a little while. But as far as neuroplasticity, experiences can negatively or positively change the brain's physical structure and its functional organization. The good news is that the brain is not entirely hardwired, but can be rewired, and neural proliferation can occur. There used to be a static premise or thinking that once many of those neural pathways were destroyed or compromised from trauma, that those would be lost permanently. But now, especially with Bruce Perry's latest research, we're seeing, and also to much extent Daniel Siegel, we're seeing that the brain can be rewired. In fact, Rick Gaskell and Bruce Perry talk about the neuroplasticity and the process of healing after a traumatic event. They say that this process isn't just a cookbook of activities to engage in post-traumatic growth, but it's a richly relational and neurobiological process. It's entered into by a child and an adult who want to be emotionally connected at a particular moment in time. In other words, these activities are simply a way to create the human interaction needed for children to learn internal regulation skills. And if you look at this picture, it's me playing chess with a child and his mother at a shelter at a disaster several years back. And oftentimes what we see, and we'll get into the specifics of the techniques that we use, but the simple process of playing checkers or chess or a board game with a child, with their family members nearby, can be a richly rewarding process as the quality of the human interaction is elevated from that of being fear, maybe feeding off of fear, or chaos feeding off of stress, to de-escalating some of the more hypervigilant emotions and hyperarousal, and taking it or lowering it to the context of something that is recognizable and comforting. In this case, the child wanted to play chess, and so we did. Let's see if anyone has any. Let's see. Is that right? Okay. So I know I'm going a little quickly. So I'm going to see if there's any questions. Let's see. I'm opening up the question. Oh, it's okay. Thank you. James Woodcock asks, in young children, how similar are these symptoms to ADHD? That's a great question. Oftentimes, they're very, very similar, and sometimes difficult to differentiate. And so we have to be, I think, careful as clinicians to not overly diagnose children with ADHD as having, traumatic reactions or vice versa. But we also see, comorbidity with an inability to sustain focus, hyperarousal, and inattentiveness. And so it's what happens when a child, and I've worked with several children over these past 10 or 15 years that were diagnosed with ADHD and then matriculated through a natural disaster. And I noticed that there's typically two things that happen. Is one, that they're system is so completely overwhelmed and that their resources are so overwhelmed that they tend, some of them paradoxically, tend to go inward and to isolate themselves and suffer with withdrawal, more so than externalizing. And then the other piece is that sometimes it exacerbates the comorbid functions. And so I think it's helpful that we explain to children what the specific or the typical reactions of a child matriculating through a natural disaster is, which is what's on your screen right now. And a little bit later I'm going to talk about how we teach parents to do this so that, you know, because we're only around these kids, you know, a few hours a day for a week or two when we're doing disaster mental health work. It's so important in that first few days after a disaster that children receive accurate information so that if there is any cognitive misattributions, they're able to counter those. Okay, let's see. Diane Dote has a question, I think all the way from Lafayette, Louisiana. What was the name of the person you mentioned regarding the study of rewiring ability? That would probably be Daniel Siegel and Bruce Perry, also Rick Gaskell. They're, Daniel Siegel and Bruce Perry are both doing a lot of research in neuroplasticity and of recovery following a trauma, especially with children. In fact, Dr. Perry was just spoke at the Association for Play Therapy conference in Houston last month. Felipe Ramirez has a question. Is emotional disconnection similar to that present in psychopathy personalities? You know, I'm not sure how to answer that other than I think it is different. I think children who have been traumatized by a disaster oftentimes still maintain a fundamental sense of empathy and caring for others. I just think that the way that they are able to access their coping skills is sometimes compromised, so they may appear to be withdrawn and disconnected, but I believe that that's often you know, a defense mechanism because their resources are overwhelmed, as most of the time are their parents too. And then last, before we go back to this slide, we have another question from Christine Cooper. She says, just to thank you for coming to Moore. I'm from the area and your help and attention were appreciated. Wow, Christine, thank you for being here. That's terrific. I'm glad you're here, and thank you for acknowledging that. So the disaster impact on psychosocial functioning. So the reason why I have this slide, guys, is I want you to be able to share with children what typical things happen so that you can, it's part of psychological first aid. It's called normalizing experiences, normalizing symptoms, rather. Preschool children may exhibit fears. Children and adolescents, typical symptoms after natural disasters include fear, depression, self-blame, guilt, loss of interest in school, aggression. For preschool children, typical symptoms include nonverbal fears expressed in constant crying, whimpering. Elementary school children may show fear of danger to self and to loved ones, increased fighting, hyperactivity. And so we see these symptoms, and while the reactions to disasters typically are resolved in time, and it moves from either a post-traumatic reaction or sometimes it segues into acute stress disorder. If left untreated, sometimes children are able to work and heal themselves, but sometimes it does, if left untreated, as we see frequently with our veterans, unresolved trauma, especially of a horrific nature, when there's been a threat to bodily life, to our bodily existence, our life could result in post-traumatic stress. All right, so So we've kind of been talking a lot about the research behind disasters and what disasters are. I wanted to kind of sort of as we move into this next section, I wanted to do an activity with you all. The next part is actually what disaster play therapy is and what techniques we use as play therapists to integrate that. But to try to make this as lively as possible, I wanted to practice with you a technique that I use that I've created. It's called Rainbow Fish, and this is one of the techniques that we use to promote safety and stabilization. So one of your learning objectives, one of our learning objectives for today was promoting safety and stabilization. So if you just look at the directions, first of all, doing narrative therapy, why don't we just take 1 second and read over the slide, and then I'll come back in just 30 seconds. All right, so we want to ask the child to identify something, a feeling, something that's, after we read the story, something that stood out, and then someone who's their friend, someone who is a friend that maybe they feel safe with, or someone who brings them some light. So I want everyone, hopefully everyone has a sheet of paper. I want everyone to take out their sheet of paper and their crayons or their markers or their colors, and I want you to draw a line down the middle of your paper. So just draw a line down the middle. And I'm going to read you this story, just as you would to children after a disaster. And then I'm going to ask you on the left side to draw a circle and to draw something that maybe you're afraid of. And then on the right side, I want you to draw someone in your life who is a friend or someone that you see as bringing you a sense of comfort when maybe things get a little bit scary. So before we start, to promote safety and stabilization, I want everyone to take a deep breath. We're going to do an elevator breath. So as we're taking our, this is what I do with kids, we imagine an elevator going from the bottom of the hotel all the way to the top, maybe the 40th floor. So let's all take a deep breath in. And then hold it. Watch the elevator go all the way to the top. And then slowly breathe out while the elevator goes back down. Okay, let's all try it one more time. Take a deep breath in through your nose and imagine the elevator going up. All right, hold it. And then slowly breathe out. Okay, now let's do a third time. I usually do these things in threes. We're going to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. All right, so here is the story. Rainbow Fish discovers the deep sea. And this is a picture book by Marcus Pfister. If any of you want to purchase this, you can get this at any bookstore or Amazon. I'm not claiming copyrights to this, but I did want to show you some of the things that I do with the kids. So, a long way out in the deep blue sea, Rainbow Fish and his friends played happily near an underwater canyon. Over the edge, the seabed dropped deep down. No one knew how far. "I would love to know what's down there," said Rainbow Fish to the little blue fish. "Who knows what's waiting to be discovered?" "If I were you, I'd stay up here," said the octopus. "I've heard that it's cold down there and dark and full of strange creatures, nothing like us." So Rainbow Fish had to be content to swim along the edge and stare down into the depths, wondering what was there. One day, a strong ocean current pulled Rainbow Fish's last sparkling silver scale right off. The scale drifted over the edge of the canyon wall and sank down and down and down into the darkness. Do you all see the little scale sliding down? Rainbow Fish wanted to chase after it, but the little blue fish pulled him back. "No, Rainbow Fish," he cried. "Please don't go after it. There are strange creatures down there." "I think I'd like to meet them," said Rainbow Fish. "Oh dear," said the little blue fish. "Wait here, I'll go get help." But Rainbow Fish couldn't wait. As soon as his friend left, he dove down into the depths. He just had to find his scale. Soon it was so dark that Rainbow Fish could see nothing except a tiny sparkling speck getting smaller and smaller below him. Rainbow Fish started to feel frightened. Then suddenly it began to get light again. A glowing pink creature seemed to appear out of nowhere. "Hello," said the creature. I'm a firefly squid. Who are you? And what are you doing down here?" Rainbow Fish swam closer. "I'm Rainbow Fish," he said. "I lost my little sparkling silver scale and I came down here to find it. You haven't seen it by any chance, have you?" "I'm afraid not," said the squid, "but I can help you look." So Rainbow Fish and the Firefly Squad set off to find the lost scale. Along the way, they met 3 glowing jellyfish. "A sparkling silver scale," said the jellyfish. "Yes, one drifted by this way. We played with it for a while, then it drifted off again. We didn't know someone had lost it. If we had known that, we would have kept it for you." Rainbow Fish and the Firefly Squid swam, that's a tongue twister, deeper down. Suddenly their way was blocked by a wavy curtain of bluish-green tendrils. "Watch out," called the squid. "Those are poisonous tendrils of a siphonophore." Rainbow Fish shivered. There was danger in the deep sea. "Have you seen my sparkling silver scale?" he asked shyly. The siphonophore was rather rude. "Down here, even the tiniest crabs glow and glisten," he mumbled. "How can I be expected to spot a single sparkly scale?" "Don't feel bad," said the Firefly Squad. "He's just like that. Look, there's a sea slug. Maybe she's seen your scale." But the sea slug hadn't seen anything. "Sorry," she said. "I wish I could help, but I don't see very well." Rainbow Fish and the Firefly Squid swam down further until they reached the seabed. "My scale must be around here somewhere," said Rainbow Fish, but it was very dark at the bottom, and the squid's light was too weak to show much. "There is a Dumbo octopus," said the Firefly Squid. "Come on, I'm sure he'll help us." But the 3 of them still couldn't find the sparkling scale. "I know what to do. I'll just give you a new sparkling costume, Rainbow Fish." And she covered him in a shower of glitter. "Thank you. It's beautiful, truly. But I really would like my scale back, too." "There's going to need to be more light," said the squid. He called all the creatures of the deep sea. Together they lit up the seabed. "Wow," said Rainbow Fish, "it's beautiful here." Then everyone looked, and there, somewhere and glittering in the water, "My scale!" cried Rainbow Fish. Thank you, I would never have found it without you." Rainbow Fish and the Firefly Squad swam home. "Come visit us again," said the squid. "I will promise, Rainbow Fish." I'm sort of skipping some of the story to keep us moving here. The little blue fish and all his friends were waiting for Rainbow Fish to come home. "Was it scary?" they asked. "Were the creatures just awful?" "No," said Rainbow Fish. "They were beautiful. They looked different, but they turned out to be wonderful friends, just like you." So, now I'd like for everyone to get out your piece of paper and your colors and your pencil, and on the left side, I want you to draw a picture of something that scares you or maybe frightens you. This is what we would tell to a child. And then on the right side, draw an image of a friend or someone who helps you feel better whenever you're afraid. And I'll give you, let's say, 2 minutes, all right? And as you're drawing, I want you to take deep breaths in and breathe out. Okay, we'll give you 1.5 minutes. Okay, let's see if anybody wants to share. Would anyone like to share what they drew? So, if you were doing this with a child, you would or with a family, you would say, "Is there anything you'd like to share about your picture?" I don't really ever do any more other processing questions. I try to just keep it very simple and open-ended. And you might also want to say, there's no right or wrong way to share, and you certainly don't have to if you don't like to. It's the same way that I do sand play and my work with mandalas with kids as well. So if anyone wants to share what their fear was and what they drew, and maybe, well, whatever you'd like to, what I find is kids usually end up saying, "Dr. Green, I don't feel as scared as I did 5 minutes ago," or "Dr. Green, I forgot that my grandma loves me." And so sometimes towards stabilization, it helps kids to recognize their support system, and this is kind of a fun way to do that. And sometimes we do a puppet show with rainbow fish. I actually got one from the Self-Esteem shop. It's a little stuffed animal rainbow fish with the sparkly scale. So let's see, I'm going to go over to see if there's any comments or questions from anyone about this activity. See, Philippe asked, is it possible to have some readings to deepen the study after the webinar? Yes, Philippe. I've got 2 pages of references at the end of this PowerPoint. Also, my new book that was just released, The Handbook of Jungian Play Therapy. I talk quite a bit about disasters and trauma, and doing mental health work with those populations. So it's certainly I have several other resources as well. There's also a couple of DVDs that I've released recently that you may want to see. Katie says, Katie Armatruda, Katie, thanks for your question. She would like for us to stress the importance of meeting the child and family's basic needs. She wants us to know that it's a prerequisite to providing psychological first aid. Yes, we're going to get to that in just a few minutes when we talk about the phases of a disaster and when we chime in, and that basically goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Thank you, Katie, for that reminder. It's very helpful. Okay, so Wendy Jacobson has one comment before we move on about the activity, and she says she notices that as an adult, like a child, she gets caught up on a particular fear. Drawing a picture of my friend brought a palpable relief. Yeah, Wendy, I think there's something intrinsically healing that can happen when we are able to externalize that image. It helps us to sort of put it onto paper, and it's, as Dora Kalf said, the famous Jungian analyst and sand play therapist, the healing is in the doing. So there's something about that doing, that externalization. And then it also, I'm glad that you were able to have some relief when you drew your friend, and that's, I think, what the purpose of why I designed this activity, to link safety with stabilization, and to link hope with positive outcomes. All right, so here is the actual, we're about the halfway point now through our webinar, and we're just now getting into the actual model. I hope that was a helpful lead up to this. There's Jennifer Baggerly. I actually took that picture. She was by an angel, and she's an angel to so many, including to me. So I wanted to include that picture so you all could see what she looks like. She's also the current president of the Association for Play Therapy. So after the 2010 Chilean earthquake, children received immediate crisis intervention and school-based group universal prevention games like activities. They were provided 3 to 6 months, these activities, after the earthquake. This is the study from Garfin, which is in the references. Children who received the play-based interventions had less earthquake-related worry and PTSD symptomatology than did the control group. 15 months after Hurricane Katrina, 118 4th to 8th grade children received 10 group and 1 to 3 individual CBT for trauma in schools, or CBITS sessions, or they received 12 individual clinic-based TFCBT, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy sessions. And both the groups that received the trauma-focused and the cognitive behavioral intervention for trauma in schools we were able to see that those were assigned, that they revealed a statistically and clinically significant improvement in their PTSD symptomatology. To date, there's also the Taiwanese earthquake that occurred, and there was research done. There were 2 counselors who implemented a study where they did a control group for children who received typical just group intervention counseling, an individual, and then one who received trauma-focused interventions. And the children who received the trauma-focused interventions increased their sense of their coping skills increased following the response to the earthquake. To date, there's only been 1 play therapy research study specifically with children following a natural disaster. Shen partook of this in 2002, and he provided play therapy to children after the Taiwanese earthquake as well. And Shen's study showed a significant decrease in anxiety and suicide risk compared to that of the control group. However, as many of you who are clinicians in play therapy have probably heard of Bratton Ray, Ryan, and Jones's meta-analysis, which showed that play therapy is an effective psychotherapy. Play therapy is an effective tool in psychotherapy. Also, you know, I really can't do this presentation without acknowledging the obvious, the gold standard in disaster care, which of course is CBT. It's the best validated treatment for children who experience traumatic symptoms. It's, as you can see from the slide here, cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy by Esther Deblinger and Cohen and Manarino, also play therapy have all been integrated to create this evidence-informed practice, which is called disaster response play therapy. Yeah, until we're able to empirically validate it through a randomized control study. You know, I do espouse integrating play therapy as an adjunct or with evidence-based interventions like CBITS or TFCBT. And we've been seeing more and more of this. Angela Kaved and Athena Drews wrote a chapter recently about this topic. Also in my new book, The Handbook of Jungian Play Therapy, I talk quite a bit about this, as well as in Jennifer Baggerly's video on this topic. Let's see. All right, so now we're getting into the real heart of what disaster response play therapy is. Disaster response play therapy follows 7 specific principles. So now we're starting to get to really into what is it, what do we do? First of all, we follow an incident command structure. This is a paramilitary method of establishing order and chaos. Jennifer and I follow this incident command structure, basing it on the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. And it's really, mental health, what this equivocates to is mental health professionals. We go to a disaster site only if we're deployed to a specific place by an official representative of a government agency, such as the International Red Cross. There's also, the International Red Cross is a non-government organization that's called an NGO. Also Save the Children, EMDR, the Humanitarian Assistance Programs. There's also the faith-based group World Vision, which is an international NGO. Again, NGOs are non-government organizations. Also there's calls like from ACA, American Counseling Association, the Association for Play Therapy, things like that. So I think to follow the incident command structure basically means you get deployed, where they tell you to go. You have to, of course, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. It's like one of the last slides. How you can become specifically certified with these organizations. I have some links for you. But basically you have to have a mental health license, and you have to have disaster mental health training, and you have to be affiliated with a group that has permission and specific credence to go into a disaster. After we get there, we don't really, unfortunately, get to choose how long we're there or where we're staying. So the incident command structure also means that we have to, usually the typical deployments are anywhere from 5 days to 2 weeks. I'd say the average deployment is 5 to 6 days. And so we go in for about a week. Usually, depending on the disaster, usually it just depends. Sometimes it's a week or two after, but it might be a month. And then there's a rotating ship. The second, understand the divergent objectives for the 4 phases of disaster. This is going to piggyback to what Katie Armatruda was saying earlier about the importance of meeting the child's and the family's basic needs. So I just want to show you all. We're going to click back to the slide, but this is me at a shelter. So the pre-impact phase is when we're providing psychoeducation. These are sort of the 4 phases, temporal phases of a disaster. And during the impact phase, which it's typically right before a disaster hits. Like if it's a hurricane, we know that ominous. I come from South Louisiana, so unfortunately I've lived through through several hurricanes. I remember as a child my mother putting me and my 2 sisters in the bathroom and putting a mattress over the bathtub, so in case the roof exploded, we would be protected under the mattress. We get our fair share of hurricanes in Louisiana, South Louisiana. So in the impact phase, this is the phase that Katie was speaking about earlier. This is when we need to, make sure that we're meeting the child and the family's basic needs. And as some of you saw from the signs from Hurricane Katrina, that people were writing on their roofs with white spray paint or whatever they could find. They were saying, help us, we have no food and we have no water. So if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that need for shelter and then for basic survival needs, really has to be met. And this is the phase that we do that in every phase, but we're particularly vigilant about that in phase 2 and phase 3, because that is when we often need to make sure that these basic needs are met. Phase 3 is the short-term adaptation. This is the typical phase where most of us as disaster mental health volunteers come in. This is, when most of the work that I've done after disasters and mass traumas, it's usually a few days till a few weeks after the disaster. And we still want to make sure that their basic needs are being met before we ever do psych first aid, because it's really hard, to focus on doing a mandala or to think about, safety when you haven't eaten in a couple days or when you haven't had, sleep in a couple of nights. So we have to be really practical. As I said at the very beginning, this isn't therapy, it's therapeutic. So the short-term adaptation phase is when we do disaster response play. It's when we adapt psych first aid and integrate play therapy. And I have here, we do sand play or sand tray. I just call it sand therapy after disasters. Art, poetry, photography, drama. I take the kids outside. If you see to the picture on the right, there we are. This was after Hurricane Rita, and we're blowing bubbles. This is a wonderful kinesthetic way of soothing the autonomic nervous system that might be overreacting. And so one of the things that I do with kids when we blow bubbles during the short-term adaptation phase is we just simply blow bubbles, and then we'll either try to pop each other's bubbles, whatever the kid wants to do. And then maybe it depends on where they are. If they are finding a place of feeling safe and stable, then we may blow bubbles and blow wishes, like I wish for a Big Mac, or whatever they might say, or I wish to give my mommy a hug when we go back inside. And so, and then another way I do bubbles is I have kids blow out their fears. So I have them think of something they're afraid of or something that's frightened them, and then we blow it out, and then if they want to pop them, or I pop them with them. So those are 3 different ways. Basically, we want to try to keep all of these interventions very simple and just focus on the relationship. The relationship between us and the child is what's so important. So the last phase is long-term adaptation. And the long-term adaptation phase is usually what occurs with children in schools. It's usually when we do CBT in private practices, when we're seeing traumatized kids. It's usually months and years, like after 9/11, the terrorist attacks that happened here in Manhattan back in 2011. Those of us who are mental health counselors sometimes, saw those children or family members for, up to a couple, 3, several years after. So the long-term adaptation really involves what Cohen, Manarino, and Deblinger termed practice, and that's psychoeducation and parenting skills, relaxation, affect modulation, cognitive coping and processing, trauma narrative, in vivo mastery of reminders, conjoint child-parent sessions, and enhancing safety. So I want to turn back time. What am I doing? No. Okay. So number 3, maintain an expectation that children and their families will have a normal recovery. So I think it's important for us to rather instead of seeing all symptoms as pathological, that we view children as having normal responses to abnormal experiences. Number 4, follow the 6 C's of disaster mental health. Those would be calmness, to remain calm and not anxious, to engage in common sense, which are helping people who are feeling panicked or disoriented. It's not the time to do psychoeducation. As Gary Landreth once said, when a child's drowning, it's not the time to teach them to swim. It's the time to offer whatever they might need at that time, and to be reassuring. Compassion is the third C, and that involves being kind. And I think, most people would say, well, gee, Eric, isn't it just assumed we're always kind? But I think when sometimes doing this volunteerism work, it is oftentimes in very heady conditions, and oftentimes we're almost, in this a very similar situation, just temporarily though, not certainly in the long term. There's oftentimes no air conditioning. There's very little comforts, and so we're sometimes, I think, our own resources as we're trying to help others become stretched, and so we need to remain collaborative, so that and in constant communication with others, and that's the fourth C's, communication. The fifth one is control of self by taking breaks. I oftentimes would keep my my mobile phone off, but a couple times a day I would remember to go outside for like 15 or 20 minutes and go, and I would call my mom or my sister or my uncle or whoever, and just have some human contact for a little while, but someone from back home, or and that helps kind of desensitize some of the overwhelming feelings I was having of almost surreal. And those of you who've done disaster work know what I mean. Sometimes it's surreal. Obviously it's surreal because it's a calamitous event, and it's really a secondary form of trauma sometimes we experience by engaging in this compassion work. Number 5, maintain hardiness and flexibility. Number 6, children are not miniature adults, so we must engage in their natural language of play. They must be, which obviously play is developmentally appropriate. As Gary Landers said, toys are their children's words and play is their language. So when we're doing disaster work, we oftentimes bring puppets, art materials, picture books. I bring sand trays, mandalas. There should be lots of opportunities for children to play with balls, bubbles, puppets, crayons. It's really hard to fly with that kind of stuff if you get flown to a place to do a disaster. So one of the things I wanted, a practical thing that it's something you just would know unless you've actually been through it, which I know many of you have gone through disasters. It's important to work with whatever agency brought you there to see if you can solicit donations once you're on the ground, and either devise a mobile play therapy kit where you get an inexpensive backpack from like Walmart or something and then fill it up with toys, or what I do is I bring it with me as one of my carry-ons, and then whenever I get to where I'm going, I use aluminum basting trays as makeshift sand trays. Like I'll go to a dollar store if there is one, those medium-sized aluminum trays, and then we usually find sand, or someone gives us sand, or I go to Lowe's or something to find sand. But so in my mobile kit, when I go to these disasters, I'll have a bag full of sand, miniatures, art supplies, picture books, bubbles, kind of like the basic necessities. Kate says she brings Band-Aids. Great, that's important. I also bring a little doctor's kit. I think I have a picture coming up of a doctor's kit. I really appreciate the way that you all are chiming in. This is terrific. It's making this seem a little bit less one-sided from my perspective, at least. Linda asked, what was the 6th C of disaster mental health? The 6th C, wow, that's really hard to say, was control, and that is taking control. So it's calmness, common sense, compassion, collaboration, communication, and control of oneself in keeping self-care. So I hope that was helpful, Linda. All right, where are we? We're at number 7. This is basically what I'm saying here is before meeting with children and parents, it's important for you to view the destruction that's occurred and to start building relationships with people in the community. The reason why is because oftentimes we'll find resilience. Okay, we'll find signs of resilience are relics of resilience that we didn't know just by being in, secluded in a shelter. Let's skip here, there. Okay, so questions so far. If anybody has a question so far, I know I've covered a lot of information in a short period of time. You're welcome, Katie. Katie just said thank you. If any of you have questions or comments, feel free to type them. Like I said, we've got a couple hundred people online, but we are, happy to entertain your questions. Oh wow, here's questions. Okay, should we be able to see each other's questions? Oh, that's probably, I have Ray here's who's at CAI who's assisting me, and she's answering those. What else would you include in a portable kit? Thank you, Kimberly Saunders, for that question. What I would be able to include in a portable kit would, I think, just the basic essentials is plain white paper, colored markers and colored pencils, sand figurines, my sand miniatures, a couple of puppets, a baby doll, bubbles, a softball, a little doctor's kit, a tiara. I always have a magic wand. I never leave home without it. Glitter, glitter and glue. I have glitter on me actually right now. It's in my bag. So glitter is a staple in the green household. I think that's also coloring books and activity books, because we don't just want to be doing therapeutic things per se. Sometimes we just need structured activities that are therapeutic because of the relationship. Thanks for that question. So Beatrice Gove asked, what was the first phase of disaster? The first phase of disaster is the pre-impact phase, and that is when we know a hurricane is coming and it's looming over. When there's an earthquake that's happened and we know that there's a tsunami that's like the pre-impact phase. And so it's also the time before a disaster, and it's a really good time for us as school counselors or school psychologists to provide psychoeducation. I have a couple of books. One of them is A Terrible Thing Happened. Well, I'll get to those in just a minute, that I can recommend that you provide, and they're free. They're no charge. Let's see. Here we have another question from Mr. Ramirez. He's asking, how do you, okay, how do you, I think the question is how do you, okay, I think so Mr. Ramirez, it sounds like you're asking about referrals. So the question is basically if after we've been there for a week and we worked with a child and we've done, we do assessments. Jennifer Baggerly usually does the assessments, and I usually do the clinical part. Even though we all do parts of it, but her main focus is the assessment piece. And then we have someone who focuses on the parent piece and the family, and I mostly focus on the clinical part with the kids. So if I'm noticing signs that there's post-traumatic or repetitive play occurring, and the child, then we may talk to the parents, like if this isn't resolved, within the next couple of weeks, that you may, want to reach back out to us to have a consult or see if maybe, so there is some follow-up with some of these children, with many of them, and we certainly don't just come in and then leave. I mean, I'm still keeping in touch with people that I worked with from Hurricane Katrina from 10 years ago. That's a great question. Let's see. Katie says, I include a visual pain scale and feeling chart. Oh, very nice. It's small and laminated so that a child can point out kind of where they are, maybe on even the thermometer, where they are with the temperature. That's really good. Thank you for that feedback. Let's see. Diane asked, how familiar are you with opportunities for mental health professional interns having the opportunity to assist through an NGO? That's a good question, Diane. Typically, to do this, you do need a license. However, if any of you are interested in joining me or joining us for one of these disasters, and you're not licensed, I could certainly would appreciate your assistance. When we went to the last disaster, we brought a cadre of our UNT graduate students, and none of them were licensed, but they were under our supervision, as I'm a licensed supervisor. So I think it's possible, and I think if you team up with the right people who would be willing to, I think you can certainly do it. If any of you are interested, if you go to my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Dr. Eric J. Green, Dr. Eric. If you like it, I'll send out messages about disasters and our work, and if any of you would like to join us, please let us know. It does take a village to do this. We don't want to be alone, so all right. So let's go to, the next blog that we have, that I wrote, is called Dark Night of the Soul. Today was our second day in Moore, Oklahoma. It was a day of unity. The team is showing cohesiveness and group bonding. The children and their families affected by the deadly tornadoes displayed strength and fortitude in coming to terms with an inconceivable loss that occurred just 2 weeks ago. And our team accepted and honored this dynamic variable by being with them without trying to change them. We set up our Disaster Mental Health Response Center at a local church, a building unblemished, while just blocks away is utter destruction as far as the eye can bear to see. Today was a day of hope. We worked with several children who were directly affected by the tornadoes. We held a puppet show, provided biofeedback, and practiced deep breathing. We read stories of how to cope with significant stress and impairment. We did sand play. We conducted group play. We engaged in expressive art therapy interventions to facilitate safety and stabilization. And I laughed a lot. We saw seeds of hope germinating with the kids playing and enjoying their day and feeling a little bit better about themselves and the world around them. Today was a day of exhilaration. How incredibly honored we feel to play some small part of this healing trajectory. This intersubjective field inherent with disaster mental health affects both play therapists and children equally. Jung once said psychotherapy is only as effective so much as the therapist changes just as much as the child does. A small change I noticed in my own approach today was to let go of preconceived notions of how things should unfold. We all benefited once we began to be more flexible and allowed children to lead their way to their own healing. Speaking of healing, today was a day of healing. One of the young boys we were working with commented to his mother, "I want to come back every single day for the rest of my life." Wow, what a long, firm commitment to the therapeutic process. If only some of my adolescent clients back home felt the same. Finally, today was a day of honoring spirituality. I'm reflecting tonight as I write this blog on the sacredness of trusting in the process of allowing God, or whatever one may call the divine, to be fully present by being open and accepting to another human soul. Being fully present today, at least, meant actively listening and non-judgmentally facilitating a sacred space so that conflicts and psychological contaminants could coalesce into a seamless harmony of simplicity. It is in the simple things in life, such as images from nature and echoes of a child's laughter, that move our psyche toward the sacred. Today I saw how embracing darkness may bring about a paradoxical encounter with the divine. And as I say my prayers before bedtime, I want to thank God for World Vision, for Jennifer, for Amy, for Marcia, for Patty, for Nate, for Carla, and for the parents who are trusting us to see their children through this dark night of the soul. Then I ended with a quote from the book of Revelation in the Christian Bible, and it said, "He shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither there shall be mourning, nor crying, nor sorrow, for these things will have passed." that was sort of a dark kind of a period. So before we move on to the techniques, I want everyone to just take a deep breath in and hold and slowly exhale with a whoo sound like this. Okay, so let's try it a second time. Everyone take a deep breath in, hold, and then slowly exhale with your whoo sound. Ooh, I feel more relaxed. Okay, one last time. Take a deep breath in and slowly exhale. Wendy Pringle, thank you for thanking me for thanking you. All right, so here we get into the actual play therapy interventions, which is, I'm sure, or maybe what some of you have probably been waiting for, those of you who are really interested in the clinical part of this. The 6 principles of psych first aid are integrated with play therapy, and this was a recommendation by Janine Shelby and Felix and Bond from their work back in 2006. And what Jennifer and I have done with this, what Jennifer's done with this actually, and what I've sort of added to it is finding how to integrate, these play therapy pieces. So mental health professionals to try to help normalize some of these atypical events by informing children and their parents of what typical reactions could be. So one of the ways to do that is like doing a puppet show. And we do puppet shows at pretty much every disaster. So what that might sound like might be the child saying, "Dr. Green, what's a tornado? Is it a monster?" And me saying, "No, not quite. Do you children know what a tornado is?" And this is doing like group play. A tornado is a violent, destructive windstorm in the shape of a funnel that can touch the ground. But then the child, this is a script from, the child might say, "What causes the tornado? Did someone get mad at me and send it? Did a witch make it happen?" And then I would say, "No, not quite. Do you children know what causes a tornado?" And then allow the children to answer, and then provide the cognitive, the correct cognition. A tornado is caused by warm, moist air in the lower part of the sky, and then cooler air that comes in from the upper part of the sky, plus really fast wind. And the weather reporter on maybe the radio or the TV or the computer will tell you when it's coming, and then you have to go and take shelter. And it's no one's fault. It's something that happens because of nature and the earth. The child says, "But I feel scared, Dr. Green. This seems like it's my fault. I got really mad at my mommy, and I said some really bad things, and then it happened right after that." And then the therapist or I would say, "It's really normal to feel that way after something scary happens. Many kids, even maybe teenagers or adults, sometimes have scary dreams. Maybe they might wet the bed. They might get really mad and want to fight, or sometimes they just want to be held. Many children cry and don't know why. Many children maybe want to stay near their parents or maybe an adult that they trust." And then children, do you have any other changes that might happen to you or that you think could happen to others? So there's just a brief script of what I do with the puppet. And so I have several puppets that I bring, and I bought all of these from the selfesteemshop.com or Child Therapy Toys. Those are the 2 places where I get my puppets from. And I get the big animal puppets. So I have a lion puppet, I have a dragon with wings, I have a great white shark puppet, I have a peacock. And what I usually do is I usually leave one of the puppets wherever I go with the organization there or with one of the families so they can, I tend to give stuff away. All right, number 2, managing hyperarousal. The hyperarousal, one of the things that mental health professionals need to do is teach children how to self-soothe and to calm their bodies, to deactivate that fight or flight response system that I spoke to you all about earlier when I talked about the neurophysiological changes that are occurring. So this could include taking deep breaths while blowing bubbles or balloons, or doing elevator breaths like I just mentioned to you earlier. Doing progressive muscle relaxation. So with kids, I usually do squeeze your wrist, squeeze your fist, tight, 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 tight. So we squeeze our hands and make it into a fist. Then I say, put your shoulders up by your ears, tight, 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 tight. And then release. And then give yourself a hug. Wrap your arms around your body so that you're touching your hands or touching your shoulders, tight, 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 tight. And then release. Also focusing on positive images, maybe mutual storytelling, meditating or doing a guided imagery on a safe place or a peaceful place. I think earlier someone asked about trauma indicators. So if a child's went through a flood, and we may not want to do rainbow fish since it takes place in water. What we could do is ask them what they find their safe place to be. Maybe it's being in the forest because they like going camping, so maybe we would help them walk through the forest, or maybe it's being in their living room playing video games. Another thing that I do to manage hyperarousal with children, and this is something that Janine Shelby and Felix came up with in 2006, and then Jennifer tweaked it a little bit as well, and that's singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, except changing the words. And what we sing is, I am safe and I am strong, take a breath and sing this song. I'm growing stronger every day, I know that I'll be okay. I am safe and I am strong, take a breath and sing along. So it goes, twinkle, twinkle, little star, I am safe and I am strong. It's I am safe and I am strong. Take a breath and sing this song. I'm growing stronger every day. I know that I'll be okay. I am safe and I am strong. Take a breath and sing along. And so that's another way to manage hyperarousal. We also do body burritos where we give kids a blanket and they can wrap themselves up in a blanket to find comfort. So that's helpful. Number 3, managing managing intrusive re-experiencing. So we have to kind of teach children how to manage intrusive thoughts that are encoded in their implicit memory. And we can do this by changing the tape. This is an activity that I do with kids, and it's when we replace, like we tell them like it's a tape, like a film, and or like a recording on a voice answering machine, and how we want to replace the negative thoughts with a song or a story, or maybe saying something as simple as I am safe, and I know it because blank. So whenever they hear the tape playing in their head, or the movie that's they're going to be hurt again, or they're seeing the tornado coming, or the flood water rising, they would replace that, which is basically thought replacement in cognitive therapy, with I am safe right now and I know it because I have my mommy next to me, or I am safe right now and I know it because I am in a shelter and the storm is over. There's also the 3-2-1 game, which comes from the 5-4-3-2-1, and it's a sensory grounding and containment procedure that was created by Baranski, Gentry, and Schultz back in 2005. We've adopted it to make it the 3-2-1. So for this, we want to ask children to identify 3 objects that that everyone can see, 3 sounds that everyone can hear, and 3 things that everyone can touch. Then 2 things that they can see, hear, and touch, and then 1 thing that they can see, hear, and touch. So this helps them refocus on the here and the now. Number 4, increasing accurate cognitive appraisals. Some children misattribute the cause of the disaster to their dreams or someone else's bad behaviors. So maybe we might want to make a blame box where children are able to draw pictures or images of who or what they want to blame, and then we correct the drawing together by finding the correct attribution. Also, sometimes I'll do a radio show when we'll have, like, maybe I'll be the announcer and I have children call in with questions, and then I act like I'm giving them information. So like I'll sit opposite so that we can't see each other, and then we'll maybe find a little play radio or something, so that sometimes we put cups up to our ears, and so there's different ways to make it fun for kids. Moving along, number 5, increasing coping skills. This is really seminal to the work that we do. We want to help children differentiate between effective and ineffective coping strategies. And we also want to remain culturally sensitive to that. So what Jennifer and I have talked about quite a bit in some of our recent work together is we can do things like pass the trash, and that's when children write like a maladaptive coping strategy, which might be getting angry at my mom, or yelling at everyone, or running away, or maybe, I've had a couple of adolescents that have said sniffing glue, doing things like that. Playing card games in which children find a pair of adapting coping strategies and then throw out the ones that are more maladaptive, and we'll help them with that, or we'll play with them, like Go Fish. Also, we do feeling charades with kids when we act out different coping strategies. We also do cooperative games like Duck, Duck, Goose. So I'm outside with the kids quite a bit when we're doing this work. I think it helps them reconnect to their archetypal selves. And also there's something I created called the coping box. I'm not sure, is it on the PowerPoint? It's not on here, but the coping box is when we have children take a shoebox and then cover it with construction paper, and then find images in magazines that relate to things that they find that are ways that they can cope, images that they find healing, things that they, and then we glue those images, we cut them out of the magazine and glue those to the box. And then inside the box, we place, if the child's like under 8 years old, I place 5 or less coping strategies, like I will walk away, or I will count to 10, or I will take 3 deep breaths, or I will tell an adult I trust, different coping skills like that. Seeking social support, we can create a doll paper support chain in which the links or images connected about different people who show them support, and then fostering hope. I have this technique I've created called When the Music Makes Me Smile, and that's when children are asked to identify a popular song. Then they do it, create an image from the song, something about the song represents. We try to find a song that represents something about strength or inner courage or resilience, we connect those to their current functioning. Also, if children want to write thank you notes to police officers or to the American Red Cross, that's there. That's another kind of like when children write to our veterans and things like that. Here's learning objective number 4. These are some of the play therapy skills that are should be transferred to disaster mental health. And that's mirror neurons can be activated. Daniel Siegel talks about this through affect synchrony and affect regulation. When we have a non-anxious presence, when we are warm and friendly, dependable, empathic, but still maintain a good sense of boundaries. And so for most of us here on the webinar today, and I recognize several of your names, we're all play therapists, so we're kind of already, we're already sold on the whole be playful and friendly and warm. But I think in disasters there's so much psychological contamination that could occur because of the deleterious conditions that we're placed in, that we have to really remember to maintain good boundaries, to not let our own temporary discomforts, or not only discomforts but concerns about the welfare because of the destruction or the death, overwhelm our own processes. And that's why we really talk a lot about doing group supervision. And I'll show you all that here. I have a little slide. Here's 2 more techniques. This is what I primarily use whenever I'm working with kids, and it's coloring mandalas in sand tray. And there's a mandala that a child created recently. A mandala is a circular shape, and there's research that shows that it decreases anxiety. Coloring mandalas, those who experienced trauma after a 1-month follow-up showed decreases in symptomatology surrounding anxiety. Wendy says a paper bag holding feel better items may be more useful sometimes, especially when we're at disasters. Yes, a paper bag could be very useful as opposed to something else that might be more bulky like a shoebox. Thank you, Wendy. That's a good point. Here's some of the information about sand tray. It's a beneficial intervention because it allows children to access their protective processes and to decrease hyperarousal. And so, like I said, I use those aluminum medium-sized basting trays. I put sand. I have my sand miniatures. I ask the children to create a sand picture. I'm quiet while they're creating it. And then after they're done, I ask them if there's anything about their sand picture they'd like to share. I say there's no right or wrong way to do it, and you don't have to share if you don't want to. Also, and if any of you are wondering about the mandalas, I do have a mandala workbook, and I believe that it's part of this webinar. For those of you who get CEUs with the webinar, there's a gift that the American Mental Health Foundation will be providing you, and it has a lot of the mandalas I've been collecting over the last 10 years, and basically I have children draw mandalas and then talk about the story of their mandala. And here's an overview of what the actual schedule looks like. Jennifer wrote this out when we were scheduling our last disaster. So you can see a terrible thing happened is one of the things that we read to the kids to help normalize symptoms. Puppet shows, group counseling, and then we alternate between 4 different modalities: non-directive group play therapy, which we call free play, expressive arts, sand tray therapy, and then guided imagery and mandalas. So we also we have a lunch, and then we do the same thing in the afternoon when the kids rotate, so they get a little bit of each area. And then, of course, we also do assessments. We work with the parents in the afternoon. So that's a little glimpse of what that looks like. We're starting to run a little long on time. So we've got about 15 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes left, 10 to 12. Okay, I'm getting the sign. We've got 10 to 12 minutes left. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. This is a case study. I won't really have time to share it with you, but I just wanted to briefly show you. Okay, Linda Small, before I go into this, has a question. She says, what are the basic miniatures you bring with you in your pack? That's a really good question. I'll show you in just a second, okay? So Miss Small, if you want to hold tight. Okay, so this is a free drawing. So I had, this is a case. So a child, I asked them to draw anything that they'd like, and so she drew this, as you can clearly see, a tornado, and then she put F5 on the top, and the house, and then there are people and furniture swirling inside, and it looks very scary. As you can see, it's online, notebook paper, so resources were limited. This was after a tornado, and all of these pictures you're about to see are all from the same child. I just want you to see the progress of her psyche and how she developed these self-regulation activities. So here's a mandala that she did, and she chose, this is one of the mandalas from my workbook, and you can see the figures are, they're colored red, there's, she used some glitter glue in the middle, and it's sort of spread out. The story on the back of her mandala, after a child colors a mandala, I ask them to write a story to have a kinesthetic component so that they can connect from their projection to their introjection. So the story on the back of this where everyone's dead, that's what she said on the back. You can kind of see some of the green writing. Again, we don't do therapy, we just allow them to externalize, and so young children have a really hard time even talking about what that means. So having her color this, and there was no directions like to create your trauma narrative. Vander Kolk in his newest research says we should never focus on that. We should focus on a meaningful trauma integration of bodily experience in the current moment. So Here's the sand tray. So Linda, those are some examples of the sand trays that I'm sorry, sand miniatures. Those are my miniatures actually. So religious figurines, different cultural figurines, just a few. I always have mythological things. In fact, that's probably what I have most of. Unicorns when I go travel and do this kind of work. Trees, some vegetation, animals, and some religious artifacts. So those are, I think, the 5 basic areas that I bring with me. You see a moon there that lights up, an altar with a cross. There's a lot of puppy dogs and people, someone in a wheelchair. There's a mountain back there that was made for me when I was in Hawaii. So different things. So that's sort of, and there's ghosts and some scary objects too. So that's basically what I bring when I go. So this was her first sand tray. And in the interest of time, I unfortunately don't have time to provide you an analysis of this. But we see the objects have been turned over and are facing down. It's startling just looking at it. Even the turtle is upside down, representing just being turned upside down. And so is the truck. It looks like it's crashed, and the building is torn apart. This was her next sand tray. So here we start seeing, and this was done over a week, we start seeing a little bit more, things are on the other, it seems like things have turned kind of upside down the right way. We see the turtle in the right position. There's also a bridge, kind of bridging. We see the ego bridging from the external to the internal. The symbol of the butterfly, a transformation there, very prominent. The stones. There's also a space shuttle. Well, I don't have really time to go into the analysis, but also notice, look at the sarcophagus at the top left of the tray. It's standing straight up. And then, of course, the phoenix rising from the ashes. This was a drawing that she did with me the next morning, and the drawing says, "This is the dragon at night. I am a scared dragon." So she's externalizing one of her fears here, and there was no instructions other than draw whatever you'd like. And then on the right side, she says, "I am brave." And so she's showing this image of fear and of courage and valor. And of course, the dragon is much more pronounced in the image than the bravery is. But it's interesting, in the middle of the image of the bravery, there's a yellow, like a light, almost in the shape of a heart. Here's her final sand tray. Thanks, Alicia. Alicia Kaplan just said, "I think she's a knight." Yeah, she's a very brave girl. This is a really a tray that is showing that she's putting fences in. So there's clear boundaries from the tigers, the wild animals that are dangerous and deadly, and then the people are protected within the boundaries. We do see a little baby zebra at the top, and then a giraffe, looking over the people. This tall kind of neck giraffe, and kind of watching over this baby zebra. It looks like the mother zebra is not there, and the baby zebra is by itself. It's also interesting in this image we see the trees that have been erected. So for the first time we see vegetation, a growth, some type of growth. And again, this was done, and this is not psychotherapy, this is just a chance for the child to externalize some of the more difficult images and to gain a sense of kinesthetic mastery towards safety and stabilization. So we never discuss any of the symbology or the analytical premises of sand like I'm doing with you all. This is just as a professional providing you some brief analysis. This is her last mandala. As you can see, it's much more colorful and bright than the first one. If you remember, The first one was Blood Red. And parent interventions, what parents can do to help their children, and also after the storm, a guide. If you could, I give you the free link there. Please feel free to go. I do want to read this last blog. This is the last, okay. This is a song from Pink. The lyrics, just give me a reason, just a little bit enough, just a second, we're not broken, just bent, and we can learn to love again. It's in the stars, it's been written in the scars on our hearts. We're not broken, just bent, we can learn to love again. Today was our third day providing disaster mental health in Moore, Oklahoma, to the children affected by the tornadoes. The theme and image of hope was a powerful resonant. As we were working today with the children, we noticed gradual, subtle shifts. Frenetic energies slightly decreased, hyperarousal diminished, and a sense of trust began to permeate the newly formed relationships. I'm proud of our team for sharing their greatest gift, themselves. The children and parents responded positively to this sharing of this gentle nature. I went outside at one point and saw the children laughing and frolicking on the playground as the team showered them with loving kindness. Hope was alive. Tonight we revisited the memorial at the elementary school where the storm hit the hardest and several children perished. There was a small child just 5 years old roaming the streets with her dad in the dark. They had both barely survived the tornado, sharing with us how their home had been destroyed just a couple of nights ago. Amy and I gave the child a bag of new assorted toys out of my trunk. The dad recovered an LCD light in the middle of this huge pile of rubble in the dark, yet it was still illuminated. The child asked, "Do you see what my daddy found? He found a light." And she was fascinated. Her dad found a glimmer of hope in this small light fixture that was shining brightly in the black of the early summer night sky. After we handed her a stuffed animal kitty cat, she affectionately hugged the cat and thanked us. Tonight, as I ready for bed and count the blessings in my own life, I find myself thinking about this child out in the streets, wandering with her dad after dark with very little to go home to. Her father mentioned that he was the one who had created the sign on the side of his house, or what was left of his house, that read, "Hope still lives here." It's the picture attached. We noticed it the very first night we arrived, and as they walked off, with his daughter smiling with her new toys and her stuffed kitty cat, I overheard him say quietly to her, "I love you, and see, Cupcake, I told you there's still hope." All right, so here's some resources for those of you who'd like to become a disaster mental health volunteer. There's the mobile app. You can also go to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. There's also a free online TFCBT training. Also, if any of you want to be deployed through the American Red Cross, I have a link there for you for the volunteer training. Let's see. I want to thank you all for joining us. This is a triumphant picture of us all as a big group doing what we love. As Jennifer Baggerly once said, this is who we are, this is what we do. It's been a pleasure being with all of you today. I want to thank you for your time. I know that you'll have many, many choices of trainings, and many of you are at work and you took off. Some of you have joined us from other countries. I saw Judy Byrons is here from Australia, and I know it's in the middle of the night there. So we really want to thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. If any of you want to stay in contact with me, here's my information. Again, if you'd like to keep up with my publications or my upcoming speaking events, go to my Facebook page and like it at facebook.com/Dr. Eric J. Green. Here are those references I was telling you all about. They're all very new. Some of this is my own research and my own recent publications with Jennifer on the disaster mental health work. Here's some more research. And then I think that's all, and I think we'll close it here for the day. Let's see. I guess maybe we'll have one final question or comment, and then we're going to close for the day. Stacy Johnson said she's learned a lot. Thank you. And Christine Cooper says, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to learning from you more in the future. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, all of you, for being here with us. And it's been a pleasure. Take good care and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.